widowed cowboy waited 5 months for help, until an Apache woman heard his baby cry. Every morning he woke before the sun, not because he wanted to, but because the baby cried. The sound cut through the quiet air, reminding him that his life had changed forever. Only a few months earlier his world had been different. His wife had been alive then. She had brought warmth into the cabin, laughter into the long evenings, and hope into every hard day. He had believed they would grow old together on this land, but fate had other plans. She fell ill during childbirth, and despite his desperate efforts, she did not survive. By the time the baby came into the world, the woman he loved was already gone. Now, the cowboy was both father and mother, provider and protector. He had never imagined raising a child alone, especially not in a place so isolated. He was a man of the land, strong with cattle and horses, skilled with tools and survival, but he knew nothing about caring for a newborn. Still, he had no choice. The baby depended on him for everything. The first weeks were the hardest. Sleep became rare. The baby cried often, hungry and uncomfortable. The cowboy tried his best to calm the child, rocking gently, humming old tunes his wife used to sing. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. When the baby finally slept, the cowboy would sit nearby, watching closely, afraid that something might go wrong if he looked away even for a moment. Grief followed him everywhere. At night, when the wind rattled the cabin walls, memories of his wife filled his mind. He remembered her smile, her voice, the way she talked about the future. He talked to her in his thoughts, telling her how hard he was trying, asking her for strength. The silence that followed felt heavier than words. Each day brought new challenges. The cowboy still had to tend to his animals, fix broken fences, and gather supplies. But leaving the baby alone, even for a short time, filled him with fear. He learned to move quickly, doing his work close to the cabin whenever possible. He carried the baby wrapped in cloth when he could, holding the small body against his chest as he worked. The baby's warmth gave him comfort, even as it reminded him of the responsibility he carried. Food became a growing concern. Supplies that once lasted long enough now disappeared quickly. Milk was hard to come by, and the baby needed nourishment. The cowboy did what he could with what little he had, stretching every resource, praying it would be enough. Some nights he went to bed hungry so the baby could eat. The land around him was beautiful but unforgiving. The sun burned hot during the day and the nights grew cold. Storms came without warning, bringing strong winds and heavy rain. Each storm tested the cabin's strength and the cowboy's resolve. He patched leaks, reinforced walls, and held the baby close whenever thunder shook the ground. Loneliness became his constant companion. Days passed without seeing another human being. No visitors, no passing travelers, no familiar voices. He would stand outside the cabin sometimes, scanning the horizon, hoping to see movement in the distance. But there was nothing, only empty land and endless sky. The baby's cries echoed across the open range, carrying farther than the cowboy realized. To him, the sound was a reminder of life, but also of fear. He worried constantly about the baby's health. Was the child growing strong enough? Was he doing something wrong? There was no one to ask, no advice to seek. Every decision rested on his shoulders alone. As weeks turned into months, exhaustion began to show on his face. His hands were rough and cracked, his eyes tired and shadowed. Still, he did not give up. Each morning, he forced himself to stand, lift the baby gently, and face another day. He told himself that as long as they were breathing, there was hope. Sometimes, he spoke out loud just to hear a voice. He told the baby stories about the land, about the mother the child would never know, about dreams of a better future. He promised that one day, things would be easier. Even when he doubted his own words, he kept speaking them, believing that hope needed a voice to stay alive. The cowboy tried to send signals for help when he could. On clear days, he lit small fires, hoping smoke might be seen. He rode to higher ground once, leaving the baby safely wrapped inside the cabin, but he returned quickly, afraid to be gone too long. No one came. The land remained silent. Despite everything, a quiet bond grew between father and child. The baby began to recognize his voice, calming when he spoke softly. Those moments gave the cowboy strength. They reminded him that love still existed, even after loss. 5 months passed slowly, each day blending into the next. The cowboy did not know how long he could keep going, but he knew one thing for certain: he would not stop trying. No matter how hard it became, no matter how alone he felt, he would protect the life he held in his arms. He had no idea that help was closer than he thought, or that a single sound carried on the wind would soon change everything. For now, all he could do was wait, hope, and survive, one long, quiet day at a time. The days continued to move forward, slow and heavy, as if time itself had grown tired on the open land. After the first months passed, the cowboy realized that survival was no longer about strength alone. It was about patience, careful choices, and learning from mistakes. Every sunrise felt like a small victory. Every sunset meant he had managed to keep both himself and the baby alive for one more day. The baby was growing, but not as fast as the cowboy hoped. Some days the child seemed calm, eyes open and curious. Other days were filled with weak cries and restlessness. The cowboy watched closely, trying to understand what the baby needed. He learned the difference between hunger, discomfort, and fear just by listening. Over time, those cries became a kind of language to him. Sleep was still rare. Nights were the hardest. The cold crept in through the cabin walls and the baby woke often. The cowboy wrapped the child tightly and held him close, sharing body warmth. He sat by the small fire, afraid it might go out while they slept. Many nights, he stayed awake until morning, afraid that if he closed his eyes, something terrible might happen. His own body began to suffer. His back ached from carrying the baby and working long hours. His hands trembled sometimes from lack of proper food and rest. Still, he pushed himself. He believed that as long as he could stand, he could keep going. Rest felt like a luxury he could not afford. The land around him did not offer mercy. Dry winds blew dust into the cabin, making the baby cough. Sudden rains turned the ground muddy and dangerous. Once, a strong storm damaged part of the roof. The cowboy worked through the rain to fix it, holding the baby inside with one arm and tools in the other. His clothes stayed wet for days, but he did not complain. Food became harder to find. Hunting was difficult because he could not leave the baby alone for long. Sometimes he trapped small animals close to the cabin. Other times he survived on simple meals that barely filled his stomach. He gave the best portions to the baby whenever possible. Hunger became normal to him, something he learned to ignore. The silence of the land pressed on his mind. Without conversation or comfort, his thoughts grew louder. He replayed memories of his wife again and again. He imagined what she would have done, how she would have held the baby, how she might have found better ways to care for the child. At times, guilt filled him. He wondered if he was failing the child by being alone. There were moments when fear took over. The baby once grew very quiet for hours, barely moving. Panic rose in the cowboy's chest. He held the child, spoke softly, and stayed close all night. When the baby finally stirred and cried again, relief washed over him so strongly that he had to sit down. He realized then how fragile their lives truly were. Despite everything, small signs of hope appeared. The baby began to smile just a little. Those tiny smiles felt like sunlight after a long storm. They reminded the cowboy why he kept fighting. He talked to the baby constantly, describing the land, the sky, and the animals. His voice became steady and gentle, even when his heart felt heavy. The cowboy tried again to seek help. On clearer days, he rode farther than before, leaving the baby carefully wrapped and sleeping. He moved quickly, scanning the land for any sign of people. Old trails showed signs of past travel, but no one came. He returned faster each time, fear pushing him back toward the cabin. His trust in others had always been cautious. Stories of danger and conflict had shaped his thinking, yet desperation slowly changed him. He realized that help could come from anyone if it came at all. Pride mattered less now. Survival mattered more. As weeks passed, the baby's cries sometimes carried far across the land. The cowboy did not think much of it. To him, the sound was just part of life now. But the open space allowed sound to travel in ways he did not understand. Each cry drifted into the hills, carried by wind and silence. The cowboy's health weakened. He caught a fever one night and struggled to stand the next morning. Fear returned, stronger than before. If he fell ill for too long, what would happen to the baby? He forced himself to move, even when his legs shook. He drank water slowly and rested when he could, always keeping the child close. During that time, he made promises to himself. If he survived this season, he would move closer to people. He would find a safer place for the child. These thoughts gave him a reason to endure the pain and exhaustion. Loneliness still surrounded him, but the bond between father and child grew stronger. The baby began to recognize the sound of the cowboy's footsteps and voice. When the child calmed in his arms, the cowboy felt a sense of purpose deeper than anything he had known before. 5 months passed like this, filled with quiet struggle and stubborn hope. The cowboy did not know that someone else now walked the land nearby, someone who lived differently and listened closely to the world around her. He did not know that his waiting was nearly over. For now, he continued his routine, unaware that the sound he had heard every day would soon reach the right ears. The land that had felt empty for so long was no longer listening alone. The morning began like many others, quiet and heavy with dust and sunlight. The cowboy moved slowly inside the cabin, his body tired from another restless night. The baby lay wrapped in cloth near the fire, breathing softly. For a moment, everything seemed calm. Then the baby cried again, a thin sound that carried pain, hunger, and fear all at once. The cowboy lifted the child and tried to soothe him, rocking back and forth, whispering gentle words. His voice was tired but full of care. Outside the cabin, the land stretched wide and silent. Hills rose gently in the distance, covered with dry grass and scattered trees. Unknown to the cowboy, someone else was moving through that land that very morning. An Apache woman walked carefully along an old path, gathering plants she knew well. She lived close to the land and understood its signs. Every sound mattered to her. Every change in the wind carried meaning. As she moved, she stopped suddenly. At first she thought the sound was part of the wind, but then she heard it again. A baby's cry. It was weak, uneven, and filled with need. She listened closely, turning her head toward the sound. Babies did not cry out here without reason. She knew this land well, and such a sound did not belong to animals or nature. She followed the sound carefully, stepping quietly, respectful of the land. The cry came again, carried by the open air. With each step her concern grew. A child in distress meant danger not just for the baby but for whoever was caring for it. She moved faster now, guided by instinct and experience. Inside the cabin, the cowboy felt something he could not explain. He paused mid-step, holding the baby close. A strange feeling passed through him, as if the land itself had shifted. He shook it off, believing it was only exhaustion. He focused on calming the baby, unaware that help was drawing near. The Apache woman reached a rise in the land and saw the cabin below. Smoke rose faintly from its roof. She slowed her steps, observing carefully. She had learned long ago to be cautious. Settlers often feared what they did not understand, and misunderstandings could lead to harm. Still, the sound of the baby pushed her forward. She approached the cabin slowly, making sure her presence was known. She did not want to startle anyone. The baby cried again, louder this time. The sound cut straight into her heart. She stepped closer and spoke softly, not in words meant to be understood, but in tone meant to calm. The cowboy heard something outside. At first he thought it was the wind. Then he heard footsteps. His heart raced. Fear rose quickly. He had been alone for so long that the presence of another person felt unreal. He tightened his grip on the baby and moved toward the door, unsure of what he would find. When he opened the door, he froze. Standing a short distance away was a woman he did not know. Her posture was calm, her hands open and empty. She did not step closer. She simply looked at him, then at the baby, her expression filled with concern rather than threat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The baby cried softly between them, breaking the silence. The cowboy felt fear, confusion, and relief all at once. He had waited so long for help that now he did not know how to accept it. The woman slowly lowered herself to the ground, showing she meant no harm. She spoke gently, using simple sounds and gestures. She pointed to the baby, then to herself, then to the water container she carried. Her meaning was clear. She had come to help. The cowboy hesitated, then stepped aside slightly, allowing her closer. She approached carefully, never rushing. When she saw the baby's pale face and weak movements, her concern deepened. Without touching at first, she observed, learning what she could. She offered water, showing him how to give small amounts carefully. She prepared a simple mixture using what she carried, meant to help the baby regain strength. The cowboy watched closely, trusting her actions even though fear still lingered in his chest. As she worked, the baby slowly calmed. The crying softened, then stopped. The child's breathing became steadier. The cowboy felt his knees weaken. He sat down, still holding the baby, tears forming in his eyes without warning. Months of fear and exhaustion broke through in that quiet moment. The woman stayed nearby, giving him space. She did not ask questions or demand anything. She simply helped. She cleaned the baby gently, adjusted the cloth, and showed the cowboy small ways to keep the child warm and comfortable. Her movements were calm and sure, shaped by knowledge passed down through generations. Time passed quietly. The sun moved higher in the sky. The cabin, once filled with tension, now held a sense of calm the cowboy had not felt in months. He listened as she spoke softly, even though he did not understand her words. Her tone carried reassurance. The cowboy tried to explain his situation with simple gestures and broken phrases. He pointed to an empty space beside him, then to the baby. He lowered his head, showing loss. The woman understood enough. She nodded slowly, her expression gentle. She stayed until the baby slept peacefully. Before leaving, she pointed to the land and then back to the cabin, signaling she would return. She placed a small bundle near the door containing helpful items she had gathered. Then she stood, met the cowboy's eyes one last time, and walked away quietly. The cowboy stood at the door long after she was gone, watching the empty land. For the first time in months, the silence did not feel heavy. It felt full of promise. He looked down at the sleeping baby and felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. That night the baby slept longer than usual. The cowboy slept too, though lightly, waking often to check on the child. Each time he found steady breathing and warmth. Relief filled him again and again. He did not know what the coming days would bring. He did not know how long the woman would stay part of their lives, but he knew one thing for certain: the waiting was over. Someone had heard the cry. The next morning arrived quietly, wrapped in soft light and cool air. The cowboy woke before the sun, the way he always did, but something felt different. The heavy weight on his chest was lighter now. He looked toward the baby and saw peaceful sleep instead of restless movement. For the first time in many months, he allowed himself to breathe deeply. He waited that day, unsure of what would happen next. He went through his usual tasks, but his eyes often turned toward the land beyond the cabin. He did not know if the woman would return or if the moment from the day before had been the only help they would receive. Still, the memory of her calm presence stayed with him, giving him strength. By midday, he saw movement in the distance. A familiar figure approached slowly. His heart lifted. The Apache woman had returned just as she had promised. She came carrying more supplies, simple food, clean cloth, and plants known for their gentle healing uses. She greeted him with a nod, respectful and quiet. Over the next few days, she visited often. Sometimes she stayed only a short while. Other times, she remained longer, helping with the baby and showing the cowboy better ways to care for the child. She taught him how to keep the baby warm during cold nights and cool during hot days. She showed him how to prepare simple nourishment using what the land provided. The cowboy listened carefully, watching every movement. He asked questions in his own way, using gestures and short words. Slowly, understanding grew between them. Language mattered less than intention. Trust formed not through speech but through action. The baby grew stronger with each passing day. Color returned to the child's face. The cries became less desperate and more lively. The baby began to respond with small sounds, even brief smiles. Each change felt like a gift. The cowboy felt pride and relief mixed together, emotions he had not felt in a long time. The woman never stayed overnight. She came and went with the rhythm of the land. She did not ask for payment, nor did she expect gratitude. Her help was given freely, guided by care and respect for life. This confused the cowboy at first, but he soon understood that her kindness came from a deep place. As time passed, the cowboy's own health improved. With guidance, he learned to care for himself better as well. He rested when he could and ate more regularly. Strength slowly returned to his body. His movements became steadier, his eyes clearer. They began to share quiet moments outside the cabin. He would sit with the baby while she gathered nearby. Sometimes she pointed out signs in the land, clouds that warned of weather, plants that could help, trails that led toward safety. The cowboy realized how much he still had to learn about the world around him. One afternoon, she showed him a path that led toward a settlement farther away. It was not an easy journey, but it was possible. She made it clear that staying completely alone with a child was dangerous. The cowboy understood. For the first time, he began to think seriously about leaving the cabin behind. The thought of change frightened him, but it also filled him with hope. He had stayed because he believed he had no other choice. Now, he saw that another future was possible. A future where his child could grow among people with support and safety. After some time, the woman's visits became less frequent. The baby was healthy now. The cowboy had learned enough to continue on his own. One day, she came for the last time. She brought a small bundle and placed it gently near the baby. She looked at the child with quiet warmth, then turned to the cowboy. There were no long words, no goodbyes spoken aloud. She simply nodded, a gesture filled with meaning. The cowboy stood and bowed his head slightly, showing respect in his own way. He wanted to say thank you, but words felt too small. She understood anyway. She walked away slowly, blending back into the land she knew so well. The cowboy watched until she disappeared from sight. He felt sadness at her leaving, but also deep gratitude. She had arrived when they needed help most, and she had changed their lives forever. In the weeks that followed, the cowboy prepared for the journey ahead. He packed what he could, repaired what needed fixing, and made careful plans. When the time came, he locked the cabin door one last time. He held his child close and stepped onto the path she had shown him. As they moved forward, the land no longer felt empty. It felt alive with memory and meaning. The cowboy carried more than supplies. He carried lessons of kindness, strength, and unexpected help. Years later, he would tell his child about the time when hope arrived in a quiet form. Not as a grand event, but as a simple act of care. He taught the child that help can come from places we least expect, and that kindness does not belong to one people or one way of life. The story did not end with struggle. It ended with understanding. 2 lives were saved not by force or pride, but by listening, compassion, and respect. And though the land remained wide and quiet, it would never again feel empty to the man who had once waited 5 long months for help.